You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is August 4th, 2024, and this is episode 289 of Lighthearted. In a few minutes, we'll listen to a conversation with three people at Absecon Lighthouse in New Jersey, focusing on memories of a legendary volunteer there. And speaking of legendary, my co-host this week is Michelle Jewel Shaw, chairperson of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Jeremy, and hello to all of our listeners out there.
Regular listeners know you're a teacher, Michelle, and of course we've chatted on the podcast about how you're teaching summer school this year. So how's that going?
So this week here is our last week of summer school. It went really well. We did lots of social emotional activities with the students and some community engagement activities where students painted picnic tables, to spruce them up so that we can use them for outdoor classrooms this school year. So it was a really good experience. I enjoyed it.
Excellent. And people might have heard before, you're actually a special ed teacher, right, Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you on behalf of people in general for doing that work.
Oh,
it's so important.
You're welcome. I love it. I do.
I know you do, and that's great. I know that it's been tough in the education field in some ways recently, but dedicated teachers like you are so important. So,
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So before we get to our interview about Absecon Lighthouse in New Jersey, we have a short segment about a lighthouse in Maine. It's a favorite for a lot of people. I think that includes you and me, Michelle. The lighthouse tower at Pemaquid Point in the town of Bristol was built in 1835, which makes it one of the oldest on the New England coast.
The historic Fog Bell building at Pemaquid Point Lighthouse was badly damaged by storms in January, the same storms that damaged more than 20 light stations in Maine and New Hampshire. Repair work on the bell house and other parts of the light station are almost finished.
Yep, that's right. The other day I had the opportunity to speak with Shelley Gallagher, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation in Bristol, Maine. Before we play it, I want to mention that we had some connection issues at times when we were talking, so a word might be lost here and there. And I just want to make it clear the keeper's house at Pemaquid Point just had a little water damage, nothing serious. The building that had the most damage by far was the bell house. So let's listen to my conversation with Shelley Gallagher now. I'm speaking this afternoon with Shelley Gallagher, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation for the town of Bristol in Maine. Thanks so much for being with me, Shelley.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. So I want to talk about specifically the storm damage that happened in January and what's been happening lately to repair the building or buildings there after that storm damage. So first of all, could you describe what happened? I believe it was kind of a double storm. I think it was January 10th and 13th. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a double storm. So the Wednesday, January 10th storm is the one that did most of the damage, and most of it was actually done before dawn. So it was, when I got there at 9:30 in the morning, the damage, like all of the walls of the bell house were already missing, and the damage had most of the way already been done. So that was, it was still a bad storm even after that. So it turned nice later that day, and we were able to get some stuff shored up, and then we had 2 days to empty everything out and clean stuff up so that it didn't become projectiles, because Saturday the 13th was the next storm going to be coming in. That was also supposed to be bad, and it was. So when I got there, the bell house, 2 of the walls were missing. It is a brick building that was built in 1897. It is double wall brick. So in the bell house, the front wall was completely knocked out, and the right side wall was knocked out most of the way. The left side, the outer brick layer, was most of the way knocked out. It's kind of a miracle that it stayed standing. Once the storms died down, we got some wood pieces, and we just stuck them up in the corner just to brace that corner, because the corner no longer had anything holding it in place. It was just dangling. So we braced that corner so at least it didn't collapse before the next high tide that night. because it was still stormy, and the next high tide, we were afraid it was going to get hit again. Next morning, it was still standing. So we were very, very happy. On top of the damage to the bell house, the other damage that happened was the fence on the entire water line of the lighthouse. That fence, all of that was hit by waves and washed up into the main building. And it was the fence posts, and the concrete that the posts were set in. All of it got ripped out and thrown up against the siding. So it broke off a lot of the siding. And so the siding all had to be redone. When the fence was hitting and things were hitting, it did some damage so there was some water damage inside the main well. So yeah, it looked like a tornado hit when we got there that morning. There was just debris everywhere. And it was just so just something that you just don't see. And the one thing that we were really lucky and happy about is, so the bell, we had cut that down in August because the beam it was hanging on had rotted. So it was actually inside the building when the storm hit. Had it not been inside the building, it probably would have been lost to sea. And that bell is one that was forged in 1848, and it was forged by Henry Hooper Company in Boston. And Henry Hooper did his apprenticeship under Paul Revere. So he learned how to forge bells by Paul Revere, and that history would have been lost, but we had it inside the building, so it actually stayed safe. We had 2 days to clean everything out, so we started emptying out everything out of the bell house so that we could try to shore it up and get it. We put in some diagonal beams to try to hold the roof in place, and then we hoped for the best for the Saturday storm. And we were very lucky that it held in place.
I don't know if you know, you probably know that in those two storms, more than 20 light stations in Maine had some damage of one kind or another. And I'm in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse near here was very badly damaged, mainly by the second storm, the January 13th storm. The base of the lighthouse was torn up. The oil house was almost destroyed. It was really serious. Those were incredible back-to-back storms. So, could you tell me what's been happening with the repairs of the bell tower and the fence and everything else there?
We are kind of in the home stretch of the repairs. We had all the siding on the main building has all been replaced, and we had the plaster inside the building. A local contractor donated labor and materials and did the repairs for that for us. Our staff rebuilt the fence, so the fence is back up. The bell house, we have a local mason that is doing that, and he's doing an amazing job. We were able to salvage for the bricks, because the building is on the National Historic Register, to keep it on the historic register and keep it as natural as we could. We needed to use the same bricks. We found all of the bricks that we were able to find. They were down on the rocks, they were everywhere. So we went hunting and we found all the bricks that we could find. And the mason took those and cleaned them all off, and he is reusing those bricks. Out of the 5,000 or so that the building will take, like 3,000 or 3,200 are our original bricks. The others came from a factory from about the same time period that he was able to locate, same color, same size, that he was able to locate through some of his contacts.
I'm imagining a group of you walking around those rocks, picking up those bricks. That must have been an interesting day.
It really was. And we're in a really great community that loves that lighthouse. It wasn't just us and our staff. A lot of people that were visiting were walking along and picking up bricks and leaving them by there also. We've had a lot of community help for all of this, for the rebuilding, for the cleanup. We did a cleanup day along the water side that got all of the actual damage. We also had a ton of roses that were along that side, Rosa rugosa.
I remember,
Yeah, so we filled 3 one-ton truckloads of Rosa rugosas that were ripped out. Those, it was a volunteer group that came in, and we did a cleanup, and we cleaned up all of those. And So the bricks and the rocks that got thrown and everything. So it's been a community effort, but we're in the home stretch. The only thing that we have left is that bell house now. So our mason, his name is Larry Luce. He's a local mason here. He has the outer layer of brick all done. The inner layer of brick is up to the bottom of the windows. So he was able to take the roof off of the jacks. About 2 days ago, the roof was lowered back onto the bricks. It had been sitting on the cribbing for a couple months because literally every brick in that building was removed for about a month. There was the floor and foundation and the roof, and the only thing in between was cribbing. So it's sitting back on it and it is getting rebuilt. The people that are going to be redoing our roof have started working. The shingles have all come in. The windows are in, so the windows will start coming in once Larry gets the rest of it all framed out. So yeah, that is our last part. The beam, we're going to rehang the bell. So the beam's going to go in here in the next 2 weeks or so. And when it's all done, we're going to do a ceremony and kind of celebrate that we finished and, we recovered and it's successful.
Wow. This is all great news. I'm so glad to hear all this. I go way back with Pemaquid Point, by the way, to the 1980s. I've been there many, many times over the years. And while I'm thinking of it, I want to mention that I'll be leading a U.S. Lighthouse Society tour that'll be there. It's a week-long tour in southern to mid-coast Maine in October. I don't have the itinerary in front of me, but I believe it's October 11th. We're going to be there with a group of about 30 people.
Oh, okay.
But maybe,
Nice.
yeah. I can be in touch with you before then, but
yeah,
I know
so
some. Go ahead.
the other thing that's going to be here that same day on the 11th is so the power of those waves. The rocks. Everybody knows that tall rock because everybody climbs on the tall rocks that go down the point. That rock that was tall that everybody climbed on is no longer tall. It broke off and got moved.
Wow.
775 tons.
Wow.
And the rocks behind it on the spine, those all broke off as well. So the next biggest one is like 250 tons. So on that same day is a geology group coming in because the rocks are very fascinating because they haven't changed in how many hundreds of years. So being able to see them is kind of cool. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing rock formations. That's one of the things that's special about that place. Well, let me ask you, on that subject, Pemaquid Point is a favorite of a lot of people. I'd say it's certainly one of the most popular lighthouses in Maine. What do you think it is about Pemaquid Point that captures people's love so much?
I think it's peaceful. Like it's literally on a point. So it's surrounded by water. You can walk down on the rocks and just sit there and hear the waves. And it's just, you're there and you kind of feel like you're just all by yourself because it literally is at the end of the point. So I think, that's part of what it is. It's a beautiful lighthouse and it is obviously, but the rock formations is the other thing that makes it, because it's just stunning with the rock formations that go with it. And, it's just the rocks and everything about those change to a certain extent. So there's always something different. We have a lot of groups that come in and do picnics. We do a lot of weddings there. And it's because it's peaceful there. And, and I think the other thing that people like is that the lighthouse tower, luckily the lighthouse tower got no damage. So the tower itself didn't really sustain any damage. But the lighthouse tower is one of the only ones here. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I know it's one of the only ones in Maine that is actually open and available to climb to the top every day.
Right.
So from Memorial Day to essentially October, people can actually climb up to the top every 7 days a week to go up to the top of the lighthouse. and they can see the view, and they can look out and they can see all of the different islands
Yeah.
and, the whales that breach and all of that. So,
Yeah.
so it's just kind of interesting.
Plus, they see the fourth order Fresnel lens that's still in place there when they climb to the top as well, which is
Oh yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
what they climb up there for. And then after they see that, they can look out and see the rest of the view. But yeah, no, they
yeah,
climb up, they definitely climb up to see the lens and see how beautiful that is. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. It's a combination of the natural environment and the buildings there is just perfect. It's one of those really special places. So, as you said, it's peaceful most of the time there. Obviously, it wasn't peaceful there for a couple of days this past January. I'm just wondering, do you feel the station is vulnerable to storms in the future?
Well, I think everywhere is vulnerable to storms in the future.
Yes.
And I think being on a point that's surrounded by water and there's nothing to stop the wind, yes, we're vulnerable. And I think we are doing what we can to take care of that. So it is the mason, he's using our bricks and he's doing the historic part of it, but inside of the layers, he's putting in fiberglass rebar and he's putting in stainless steel like turnbuckles going from through the roof beams and into the floor, into the foundation, and putting in different wiring to keep everything together so that it is stronger. So it keeps the historic look. Nobody's going to see that part of it, but it will be able to stand up to a little bit more
Yeah.
because it's going to have that part of it in place that obviously wasn't able to be done in 1897.
Yeah.
So, we're doing what we can to make it able to stand up to storms better. But when you have a historic building, there's only so much that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad to hear about that extra reinforcement that's being done. It reminds me of a couple of lighthouses, one being Goat Island and Kennebunkport, another one being White Island here on the New Hampshire coast, where they had covered walkways between the house and tower. In both
Yeah.
cases, they were washed away in storms and then rebuilt in recent years much stronger than they were before. And those structures have held up through obviously some bad storms recently. So pretty similar situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, so again, it's all good news, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the celebration and everything for the repaired bell tower. I know there's a lot of people listening who love that lighthouse. People ask me fairly often, "What's going on with the repairs of the bell tower at Pemaquid Point?" So they'll be really happy to hear this.
So if people go to our Facebook page for Bristol Parks and Recreation Maine, I do a lot of pictures and updates on the Bell House on our page
Hmm.
with pictures and things like that. So people can see some of the updates and see how it's going on there. So yeah.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, Shelley Gallagher, I really appreciate your time today and congratulations on all that's been accomplished recently there. And I wish you continued good fortune with that. Thanks so much, Shelley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
The town of Bristol manages the buildings of Pemaquid Point, including a museum and the Keeper's House. But I wanted to mention that it's the Friends of Pemaquid Point Lighthouse, a chapter of the American Lighthouse Foundation, who open the tower to the public every day in season. Everyone there does a great job, and it's one of my favorite places.
Mine as well, Jeremy. I've been up there so many times for sunrises and sunsets, and it's just such a beautiful, beautiful lighthouse and property. It's been a while since I've been up there. I need to get back up there, but I do. I love it up there.
Yeah, oh, it's a really special place. And well, in the interview with Shelley, she said how peaceful it is. And obviously, at times, like those storms in January, it's not that peaceful. But most of the time, when you go there, it's. I love just going off on the rocks somewhere and sitting and looking at the
Yep.
ocean and looking at the lighthouse. And it.
Pemaquid was actually the first lighthouse tower that I ever climbed.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so it's
Yeah,
special.
it's a good one to climb. It's a great view, and you get the fourth order Fresnel lens there as well. So.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely a very special place. So before we move on, I wanted to pass on a little more news from Maine. Michelle, you can go first.
Sure, Jeremy. Rockland Breakwater Lighthouse in Midcoast, Maine was damaged in the same storms in January. A couple of weeks ago, public access to the lighthouse was shut off until repairs can be made, out of the concern that the slate roofing tiles could fall and injure people. Congress approved $125,000 in 2022 for repair work on the building. That money will be matched either by the city or private donations, and private fundraising is also underway.
The same January storms damaged the footbridge that provided access to Marshall Point Lighthouse, another really popular one. The St. George Historical Society hopes to complete repairs there in the fall.
The Friends of Seguin Island are the stewards of an historic light station at the mouth of the Kennebec River. They have launched a $3.5 million fundraising campaign for restoration. Last weekend, they held a Celebrate Seguin fundraising event at the Maine Maritime Museum.
There's one more thing I want to mention related to Maine lighthouses. The U.S. Lighthouse Society has just published a new edition of a 1935 book called Maine Lighthouses and the People Who Kept Them by Robert Thayer Sterling. It's annotated by me, and it's now available on Amazon. Our mutual friend, Michelle, Cindy Johnson, did a lot of proofreading on the book, so a shout out to her.
Shout out to Cindy.
Yeah. So, Michelle, let's get to today's next interview.
Sure, Jeremy. Absecon Lighthouse in Atlantic City, which began service in 1857, is New Jersey's tallest lighthouse and the nation's third tallest masonry lighthouse at 171 feet. It's been restored by the Inlet Private/Public Association and is accessible to the public as a popular tourist attraction.
In July 2023, I interviewed the Lighthouse's executive director, Jean Muchanic, and also Buddy Grover. Buddy was a docent for more than 10 years, and he passed away this past January at the age of 96.
We have 3 guests today. Milt Glenn is the manager of operations and education, and Dan Heneghan is a volunteer docent. And Jean Muchanic, the executive director, also takes part in the conversation.
I visited Absecon Lighthouse during my trip down the coast recently in May, and Dan and Milt were great hosts the day I was there. This interview was done later after I got back home. Most of the conversation focuses on Buddy Grover, who, as you'll hear, was a very special volunteer and person. So let's listen to that conversation now. I'm speaking with 3 guests connected to the Absecon Lighthouse in Atlantic City today. We have Milt Glenn, who's the manager of operations and education, and Dan Heneghan, who is a volunteer lightkeeper, and Jean Muchanic, the executive director, who has been on the podcast before. In fact, twice, I believe, Jean, right? But the longer interview I did with you and Buddy Grover was just about exactly a year ago. We're speaking on July 3rd. It was July 9th last year that I interviewed you and Buddy.
Oh, that's incredible. It doesn't feel like a year. As time always says, it feels just like yesterday.
It does. It really does. So since I just mentioned Buddy, well, first of all, thank you all for being on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
So speaking of Buddy, Buddy Grover, of course, was a legend, I would say. He was a volunteer there for more than 10 years, and sadly, he passed away at 96 this past January. So this is a question for all 3 of you starting out, and you can fight as to who answers it first. But for anybody who didn't know Buddy, how would you describe him?
I'm going to say let's have Dan go first because he's a fellow volunteer.
Okay, Dan.
Buddy was a gem. He was an incredible guy. You just had to fall in love with Buddy. He really enjoyed being at the lighthouse. He taught me so much. He taught me how to be a lightkeeper. He was lively. He was knowledgeable. He was just an incredible guy all around. I cherish the moments I was able to spend with him. Funny story, when I used to go over there every Friday afternoon just to climb and see Buddy. And I would go at the end of the day. When his shift was over, I'd come down with him. Well, one day, as he was going through his ritual of kind of closing the lighthouse, he had a water bottle, and he looked at me with this kind of impish grin, and took the empty water bottle and just threw it down the stairs to listen to it go, bouncing down the steps. And he said something, he's got so much stuff he has to carry down. This just makes it a little easier. But he clearly got so much joy out of just tossing it down there. And he'd go down, the 22 steps or whatever it was to where it landed, and kick it down some more. And it got to the point He had so much fun doing it. I brought along a water bottle.
Yeah.
So we'd start doing it together and see whose water bottle would go further. And then I brought along a tennis ball, and he had this childish grin. He so enjoyed that, but he so enjoyed life.
Yeah.
Just about everything he did, he really relished and threw himself into and had fun. He was a marvelous guy.
Yeah. I certainly got a sense of what you're talking about when I interviewed him. Sorry, I didn't get to meet him in person. Very sorry. But Jean or Milt, you want to answer the question?
Buddy, it's funny. As Dan was speaking, I'm trying to think, what am I going to say? Buddy was a true ambassador in all sorts of the word, not only for the lighthouse, but for Atlantic City, and also for, living life to its fullest. Age didn't stop him. He, like Dan said, he's just full of life, and just you could see in his eyes just how much he enjoyed everything he did, from telling people about the lighthouse, telling people about Atlantic City's history, telling people about his own experiences in life. You could start a conversation with Buddy. An hour later, you realize, good Lord, we've been talking for an hour and you just didn't care. The man was amazing. Buddy was more than a friend, not only to me, but also my wife. Buddy was family. And I miss him tremendously. I really do.
Jean, want to add anything?
Yeah. So, well, as Milt was just talking about, Buddy and I and my husband John, we all became very close and spent many occasions together, including sleepovers up near Lambertville, him being invited to our Thanksgiving dinner, him being invited to Milton Kim's for Christmas Eve dinner. And when Buddy first started volunteering here in 2009, I was like, he's such a sweet guy. It was a Friday and it was like the end of the workday. And I said, oh, Buddy, would you like to go out for a cocktail somewhere in Atlantic City? And he's like, sure. So that began our kind of Friday nights of cavorting. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Okay. Going all around Atlantic City, going to different restaurants and bars and making friends with casual guests of theirs who were sitting around us, and also the employees and staff of these various places. And Buddy is kind of like a little bit of the norm of Atlantic City. If you guys remember the show Cheers, like when you would walk into a place and people knew him, they would just go, Buddy. So It was he was really fun to be around. And our memorial service for him, the celebration of life, was just last Wednesday at famous Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, which is itself an historic site and also houses the world's largest pipe organ. And Buddy, besides being a volunteer here at Absecon Lighthouse, was also a volunteer for the historic organ. So his memorial service included 5 or 6 selections of the world's largest pipe organ played out in giant Boardwalk Hall, and the sound of that organ was simply incredible.
I bet.
The kind that you can feel, in your chest, like, oh my God, and it came out different chambers, the noise or the sound. So that was thrilling. And then we all recessed for kind of a mini cocktail hour and speeches and presentations in the Adrian Phillips Ballroom. And I pointed out during my presentation, there were many fond memories I had of Buddy, but one thing I mentioned about him is as we were out meeting people around Atlantic City, of course, and then he would say, well, I'm 90 years old, I'm 91 years old, or everyone would say, what's your secret? You look fantastic. And he did have a secret for that, and he did have a secret for longevity, and I shared he had kind of 3 guiding principles: stay intellectually engaged, stay socially engaged, and stay physically engaged. And then you keep the gears moving, and that's how you achieve a lifetime of fun. And just to kind of dovetail back to both what Dan and Milt were saying, completely inspirational person. Fun, witty, charming, a true gentleman, sartorial splendor. That was also, a good role model to the other people around him. They're like, he was always dressed to the nines. He was a pure gentleman. And I think that, as the saying goes, they may have broken the mold when Buddy River came along.
That's a good way to put it.
We just loved him dearly. We all loved him dearly.
Yeah. I almost feel like I knew him, and not, of course, not even remotely compared to you, but I was so glad I had the chance to interview him with Eugene via Zoom. Again, I'm sorry when I just visited your lighthouse a couple of months ago that he wasn't there for me to meet, but
Right.
I'm very glad we got that interview recorded because he was great, and I will refer people to that. I don't have the episode number in front of me, but again, it was posted in July of 2023, and people can find it easily enough if they search for Buddy Grover Light Space Hearted. They'll find it. And I'm so happy we got that recorded. So I'm glad you brought up the celebration of life, Jean, because I was going to ask you all about that. Dan or Milt, I don't know if you want to add anything about the experience of that event last week.
As Jean mentioned, one of the wonderful aspects of that was this concert. Buddy spent an awful lot of time volunteering, helping to rebuild this massive pipe organ, and he had lots of friends who had been involved in doing that. He had mentioned a couple of times that they really enjoyed having him over there because he was such a slight gentleman that it was easy for him to squeeze into some of the narrowest parts of this organ to help repair and clean things. They also told folks how he would clean the floors, and he told people that he was older than dirt.
I remember him saying that in the interview.
He was older than the dirt in the organ that he was cleaning.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, Buddy was a connoisseur of music. If you ever had the opportunity to be in his apartment, the collection that he had, it was amazing. I mean, I don't think there was any space at all on the shelves where you could see the back wall. Records, unbelievable. And the music that was selected, especially the opening piece, Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Brahms, completely not only showcased what the pipe organ at the Boardwalk Hall could do, but of course, Brahms was also one of Buddy's personal favorite composers. So it all just came together wonderfully.
Was he mainly into classical music or other forms like jazz or anything else?
I know he was tremendously into classical. I think he had an enjoyment of certain contemporary music.
Well, jazz too. We played his favorite song at the memorial service, "Lush Life" by Billy Strayhorn. So that's.
Well, I'm sorry. What was this? What's the song again?
"Lush Life."
Oh, okay.
By Billy Strayhorn. So that was his little section of jazz. Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to get back to Buddy, okay, in a few minutes, but I just want to talk a little bit about other stuff. Well, first of all, Milt, again, your title is Manager of Operations and Education. So what sorts of things do you do there?
I wear many hats. Of course, one of the first things that I want to make sure is that, all of our, first of all, I oversee the volunteer program. And that is one of the top priorities that I personally look at as like I said, top priority. Want to make sure that all of our volunteers, we've got them on a schedule that they can handle. I want to make sure that they're comfortable. I want to make sure that, they know what they're doing. If they have any issues whatsoever, I always let them know, please do not hesitate to reach out and let me know. One of the things, of course, about being a volunteer at the Lighthouse is that you do need to be able to interact with our guests. And of course, granted, we kind of have, I guess, a little inside joke that there's a top 5 amount of questions that everyone asks. But, our staff is just dynamite. They really do. We've even just brought on somebody relatively new within the last couple of weeks. And already, she was working yesterday and had people come down and they just said how wonderful she was. Her name is Kathy. And it really does. If you're going to be in a town that is all about tourism, to be able to interact with people, you've got to have that skill. And a lot of folks don't.
Yeah.
A lot of folks don't. And that's one of the big things that I always look for when I sit down and I talk to people about being a volunteer. Other hats that I wear is, of course, I oversee and manage the gift shop. Make sure, of course, that we have plenty of things that are on stock for folks to take home as souvenirs. Keep an eye on the property. I do a lot of hands-on little knickknacks here around the property, just to make sure that it looks good, that, light bulbs, screws, all of those little things. And then there's the educational aspect, whether it be working with our local schools to set up class trips, whether it be right now I'm starting my summer camp tours. So, it's always happening, it's a clock that is constantly in motion, and I love it. I really do. I guess you could say since I was at the age of 16, in one way or another, I've always had customer service jobs, whether it be in food and beverage, hotel and hospitality, sales and marketing. It's always been around customer service, and it all culminates right here. I get the best of every world.
Yeah, Milt's making a really good point, because you can teach someone almost any skill, but you cannot teach personality, hospitality, charm, friendliness. So people either have that naturally and then convey that to guests, or they don't. And so, Milt makes a really good point, and he's fabulous with all of our guests and school tours. Yesterday, I think he had like 75 kids on the lawn, and we're under some repairs inside the cottage right now. So we had construction crews here. So Milt had to kind of, quickly alter the normal flow of traffic through the museum and manage things from the lawn, and everything worked out very smoothly. And in the meantime of all that, we had a visit from the New Jersey State Historic Trust. And so I was managing that part. So it was like a really busy but very fun day for everybody.
Like controlled chaos, but in a good way.
I like that. We'll steal that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, I know from experience, since I visited there in April, that you were, you greeted me and were extremely hospitable, Milt. But
Thank
so
you.
was Dan here. Dan, I know, speaking of people who love showing people around and talking to the public and everything, I know that you are one of those people, Dan. And I want to thank you again for the tour you gave me of the lighthouse when I was there. Very much appreciated. So when you're there, when the lighthouse is open, you're not walking up and down the stairs constantly, but you have different positions. Is that how it works? Where you talk to people?
My role as a volunteer is to basically sit up at the very top in the watch room and greet people when they come up and tell them about the lighthouse and answer whatever questions I have, and go through the history. Describe the lens, whatever they seem interested in. One of the things I learned from Buddy was that keep talking until our eyes start to glaze over. So I just have a wealth of information that I've picked up over years, that I'll just keep talking to people and tell them about the light, tell them about how the place was built, tell them about George Meade, tell them about the other lighthouses in New Jersey. I bring with me a photo album of pictures of lights that I have visited, and tell them all about the different style of lighthouses, tell them all about the different styles of lenses. I just keep going until our eyes glaze over.
Yeah, I remember Buddy saying that in the interview as well.
Yes,
made me laugh the first time and again now.
Jeremy, if I could interject real quick. One of the things that I personally appreciate about having Dan as one of our light keepers is that, Dan worked for the Atlantic City Press for many, many years.
Okay.
He, of course, also worked for the Casino Control Commission in the very, from pretty much the get-go when casino gambling became legal in the state of New Jersey. So Dan knows a lot of history about Atlantic City. And it was the same with Buddy. Being that Buddy spent almost 50 years in this town, he saw it go through many different phases. And of course, most people, when they come here, they'll ask us questions about the lighthouse. But every once in a while, you'll get somebody who kind of asks those strange tangent questions. And it's people like Dan and Buddy who know the history and were able to go that extra step to answer those questions that many other folk may not even have a clue about what they're talking about.
How long have you been a volunteer, Dan?
Officially, I've been a volunteer since October of 2018, but I was a regular climber of the lighthouse for 5 or 6 years before that. And when I was doing that, I saw every other volunteer up top and heard the spiels they had, and saw the different ways that different people interacted with the public, and learned an awful lot from that. And then I retired July 1st in 2018, and then started volunteering with the Lighthouse Challenge in October. I basically took the summer off and then officially became a volunteer.
Yeah, that sounds like you were very much up to speed when you officially started as a volunteer, for sure.
When we bring on new volunteers, Milt will regularly have them go with somebody else, when somebody else is up top, and kind of listen to the presentation that people make, give them some orientation, if you will.
Yeah.
They didn't do that for me.
They need to.
Didn't feel we needed to.
Yeah. No, we at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, near where I live here, that I've been involved with for 23 years. We used to have tours. Now we have storm damage. We have no tours. But when we did, new volunteers would shadow somebody, we would say, until they learn the ropes. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Do you ever get any, well, Milt, I think you kind of said there are like frequently asked questions, FAQs you get, but any really strange questions? I'm sure there are, but anything that comes to mind?
We actually are a haunted property. In 2009, the ghost hunters that were from the Sci-Fi Network actually did an investigation here.
Yeah.
And that kind of spun paranormal investigators to call us and ask if they could do investigations. People still remember that episode, and we have people that come in, ask questions. In fact, it got to the point where, was it last year or 2 years ago? It was last year that we put it together. Brochure.
Oh, the brochure, yeah.
Yes. Jean and I sat down, and we actually put together a little takeaway brochure to answer a lot of the questions that people would normally ask about the hauntings here, how an investigation is done, the professional equipment that is used, because there are going to be times when folks would ask our volunteers a question about the paranormal. They'll refer to me because I've been hosting paranormal groups for over 10 years, but I unfortunately may not necessarily have the free time at that point to answer their questions. So that's why Jean and I sat down and created this. Some of the other odd questions, we're in an area of Atlantic City where there's unfortunately still a lot of open and vacant land. And a lot of this land was at one point in time had homes on it, but the homes were so severely damaged by Hurricane Sandy that they were slated as unfit for living. So of course they were torn down, and there's still a lot of room for development, but it's a slow forward process.
A lot of the land around here was bought up by speculators, during the casino boom. And especially when Hard Rock got, opened, and then Revel was created, that's now Ocean Casino. Then they're very close to the inlet area of Atlantic City. And so speculators came in and thought, ooh, this land is ripe for development. But so far, not much has been developed. However, I can report that right across the street on Pacific Avenue from the lighthouse, we have 100 condominiums by Hovnanian builders that are going to go up between Rhode Island Avenue and Maine, right up to the boardwalk. And there's also a new 16 condominium parcel being built just 1 block away called Lighthouse Row. And so the inlet is really ripe for development, and people are starting to notice that It's like basically oceanfront land that's available. And sometimes it goes on an auction block and people get it. One guy created a mini golf right up on the boardwalk by getting pretty much oceanfront auction land, which is fabulous.
As you're saying the names of the streets, of course, popped into my head. Of course, the streets in Boardwalk, I mean in Monopoly,
Monopoly,
are
right?
named for the streets
Yeah.
in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
But and that brings us back to Buddy. Now, I believe a street or avenue, or you can tell tell about. Before I say that, I just want to say that unfortunately, I don't know if they'll actually change the Monopoly game to have the Buddy Grover street in the game. They should. They very much should.
See what happens.
Yeah, but tell me about that, about the renaming of the street there.
Yeah, well, Buddy got off the jitney the jitney, for your listeners who don't know, is a small minibus that rides around Atlantic City, taking people from one destination to another, hotels, spots, restaurants, and it's a very historic form of transportation in Atlantic City. And it's called a jitney because the word jit was a shortcut for a nickel. And it used to cost a nickel to ride the jitney. So that's where the name came from. But his jitney would drop him off right on the corner of Rhode Island and Pacific. So our first ward councilman, Mr. Sporty Randolph, when Buddy passed away, and we petitioned the city through emails, and it was a unanimous decision with all the ward councilmen of Atlantic City to rename Rhode Island Avenue between Pacific and Atlantic Avenue the George Buddy Grover III Way. And so his family was in town last week for the celebration of life. And the following day, on that Thursday, in the morning at 11:30, we had staff and volunteers. We opened the lighthouse late by an hour so that everybody could attend the ceremony out front where they revealed the street name sign. So that was how that came about.
That's just great that you did that. I don't know, Milt or Dan, if you have anything you want to add about that part of it.
I am just still amazed because from what I understood, it was a 3 voting process. It originally comes up in front of city council for 1 vote. A month later, it comes up in front of city council for a 2nd vote. Then it gets sent to the mayor's desk to sign. So it could take anywhere from 3 to possibly 4 months to get this done, just straight on through. First vote, unanimous. 2nd vote, unanimous. Put on the mayor's desk, signed. It was wonderful that it just right on through.
Yeah.
I think that kind of is a testimony to just how many people just absolutely love this man.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That proves it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing about Buddy, something that's happened recently. I understand a Buddy the Lightkeeper Legacy Fund has been established. Can you tell me about that? Maybe Jean?
Yeah, it's in the works right now. We have, a basic outline for it. And Buddy was really committed to trying to raise funds for the lighthouse. And he himself was a member, and we tried to deflect his checks a couple times, but he was very insistent. So, of course we accepted, but he was always like, I want to help raise money for the lighthouse, whatever he could do. And so I wrote a grant to the Ren Sanchez Foundation, which operates a community fund in town called Thrive AC. And under those auspices, we're creating the Buddy the Lightkeeper Legacy Fund. And it's in development right now. Actually, on my calendar this afternoon is to write the copy. I'm meeting with the graphic designer next Wednesday to develop the materials that go along with it. One of the things that will be part of that Legacy Fund will be an annual Guiding Light Award. And so we'll develop that to award however the parameters are set, but it would be somebody that pretty much, embodies the characteristics of Buddy and spreads those kind of, good feelings through the community. So it's in development, Jeremy, so I can't give you like more than the basic concept right
Yeah.
now, but we're hoping to launch those materials and have everything printed and ready to go by Buddy's birthday, which annually we always hosted a party for him on September 24th. And this year it's a Tuesday. And it will be a fundraiser for the lighthouse in Buddy's name and in honor of his birthday. And so that's also in the works. Securing a location at the moment is, something I'm working on. And yeah, so that's what's happening in regards to what you had mentioned about the Legacy Fund.
Well, that sounds just perfect. What a nice memorial. I mean, there's a number of nice memorials to him, but that sounds absolutely perfect. Another thing that I noticed when I was visited there and I looked in the gift shop is you have Buddy Grover t-shirts. I forget, remind me what it says on the t-shirt.
I met Buddy at the Absecon Lighthouse.
Okay. Are you still selling those?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Yeah. And people probably come in all the time who met Buddy and or know about him. And
We have people that visit us from all around the world. And, that in itself is amazing. We'll have people that came 10 years ago and decided to come back to Atlantic City, and they see those shirts. They're like, I remember Buddy. He was here when we came. Yeah, again, we've said it before, and I'm just going to reiterate it. There isn't a person who hasn't met him who in one way or another wasn't impacted by just how amazing he was.
yeah. Well, that goes for me, just having met him, virtually. Jean, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention too, since we are talking about Buddy's celebration of life, that as a former Marine, his family was able to gain permission from the Coast Guard. And after the street naming ceremony, they went out on a Coast Guard boat. I don't know if you call it a cutter.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. They went 3 miles out in the ocean and were able to drop his environmentally, packaged remains. And the Coast Guard did this beautiful folder for them, leather folder. One side was, a written script of Buddy's name and the date of the burial at sea and the actual, hour of the tide, where the tide was during this moment when his body was sent to sea. And then on the opposite side of this file folder was a map of the coast and the ocean latitudes and longitudes. And they were able to put a star and pinpoint exactly where Buddy's body was buried at sea.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. It is. It's very touching. I didn't know about that. And I'm glad you mentioned Buddy being a Marine veteran as well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously an important thing.
It was like an artichoke, and that's what happened when we would go out on Friday nights. Each Friday, I would learn something new about
layers.
Yeah, that's how I learned how amazing he was.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one final question for all three of you, and this question just popped into my head a minute ago. But I'm gonna go ahead and ask, and this is for bonus points. Okay. Mm-hmm. The question is, what one word pops into your mind when you're thinking of Buddy?
My best friend.
Okay, that's 3 words, but I'll definitely accept it. I give you an A for that. So Dan or Milt?
Gregarious, outstanding, fun-loving, lots of words.
Yeah. Well, that's it's unfair, I know, to say one word. So
that's a good point, Jeremy.
Nope, I got it. I got it.
Go ahead.
Fabulous.
Okay.
And I say that because not only was he fabulous, but that was one of his favorite words to use. I used to hear him say that all exactly.
Fabulous.
That's perfect. And I think that's a nice way to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much again. I'm sad that I didn't get to meet Buddy in person, but I'm so glad I got to talk to him virtually and record the interview.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're very welcome.
Talk to us about Buddy.
Yeah.
More memories made in his honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, all three of you. And obviously we'll stay in touch and be doing more things together in the future. On behalf of Lighthouse Nuts everywhere, I thank you for everything you do at the Lighthouse, at Absecon Lighthouse, and everything you've done in Buddy's honor. It's just wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can learn more at abseconlighthouse.org. One more thing that's been named for Buddy Grover is a little library near the lighthouse. It's a book sharing box that is accessible 24/7. The official name is Lightkeeper Buddy's Little Library. I love that. I
Yeah, I
love
do
that.
too. Isn't it great? It's not like a big
Yeah.
memorial or anything, but
No, but I like that.
yeah, well, he's had
As a reading teacher, I really like that.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
No, I agree. I think Buddy would love it too. And of course, the more things named for Buddy, the better. As Jean said in the interview, they broke the mold with Buddy. He was a light for everyone who knew him. If you want to hear the interview with Buddy on this podcast in July 2023, go to episode 233. Again, thanks to Jean, Dan, and Milt for today's interview. There's something I wanted to mention related to last week's episode about Key West Lighthouse in Florida. Dr. Corey Convertito, who is the director of the Key West Arts and Historical Society, said that Sand Key used to be an island where people would picnic, but that the island has washed away. Eric Martin emailed me a couple of days ago, and he pointed out that the island has disappeared and reappeared several times over the years. He says the island currently appears at low tide, about 20 feet from the Sand Key Lighthouse. He said there's room for about a half dozen people to have a picnic lunch. So I just want to clarify that a little bit. To change the subject, Michelle, our local group, Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, is having a special cruise on October 1st.
That's right, we are. We're calling it Whales, Lighthouses, and Photography Lollapalooza Cruise. It will be a combined whale watch and lighthouse cruise with the added bonus of a guest photographer who will share tips for great photos.
I will be narrating the lighthouse part of the cruise. We'll go close to 3 lighthouses, Portsmouth Harbor, White Island, and Whaleback, and we'll see some very interesting marine life, I'm sure. The guest photographer will be Mike Leonard, who listeners might remember from some past episodes of this podcast.
The cruise will leave Rye Harbor, New Hampshire at 12 p.m. on October 1st and will return at 7 p.m. Details are at portsmouthharborlighthouse.org.
I also want to mention 2 things that the U.S. Lighthouse Society is doing. We're having our 2nd annual Lighthouse Dance-Off, and the deadline for submissions is August 25th. Check out uslhs.org and look under What's New for the details. You don't need to know how to dance. Just look at the video last year from Portsmouth Harbor Light. You'll see me, and you'll know that I don't know how to dance. You just need to have fun and show some lighthouse spirit. Also, on Saturday, September 7th, we will be holding a virtual telethon to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. There will be lots of special guests and surprises, and the audience will get to vote for the winners in the dance-off. Go to uslhs.org and look under events for details.
Remember that donations to the U.S. Lighthouse Society and memberships help to support this podcast, as well as preservation grants and all the Society projects. And if you listen with Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us. You might get to hear your review read on the podcast.
In next week's episode, we'll have 2 segments, one with Sue Ellen Wedmore, a poet who has a new book of poetry called A Fixed White Light, and we'll also have a segment about the New Bedford Whaling Museum in Massachusetts. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.